Welcome back, everybody. This right here is southern Florida. Check this out. Southern part of Florida, we put it in red. I want to introduce you to your new neighbor, and it is China, because China is in Cuba, because they are planning a new joint military training facility. This is a new revelation to us, but not to our intelligence community and not to the military. They're planning to expand their relationship with Cuba, an impoverished nation run by horrible communist people, but are desperate needs of billions of Chinese dollars. Here's how close they actually are to us. Are you comfortable 90 miles from Miami? Now, it's not just tourists and residents of Florida that should be concerned. What about our own military bases? We have a military base at the furthest south period. This is where you find Hemingway's house. This is where Truman used to vacation, a major facility down there. And then you have the Homestead Air Base. They'll be listening in, and they'll also be susceptible possibly to a Chinese-Cuban attack. We wouldn't have put up with this in the 60s. In fact, JFK didn't. Why are we putting up with it now? Let's bring in General Jack Keane to analyze where we're at with China. And a little bit later, General, I'd like to talk to you about what's happening with the counterstrikes in Ukraine. But first things first, your take on four bases now being built by China in Cuba.
Yeah, well, those are listening bases is what we're led to believe. They were put in there. One of them was put in there in 2019, and that's the year that they began to morph them into 4 additional bases. And they're designed to monitor transmissions, telephone communications, radio communications, if they're very sophisticated, even satellite or internet communications. Now look at Brian, we've got a Navy base right there in Cuba, and we have potential to thwart this capability.
Gitmo.
And obviously we can sit off the shore of Cuba in international waters, and also we have potential to thwart the capability. In terms of putting a training facility in there, I think, and bring some Chinese troops there, I believe they're poking us in the eye over Taiwan. I mean, obviously, we're helping Taiwan, we're arming them, and we got troops in Taiwan, but there's no moral equivalency here for viewers to understand. China is threatening to take over by force a democratic free nation, which Taiwan is, if it doesn't voluntarily submit to China control. We are not threatening to take over Cuba. We have tolerated a communist regime there for decades. We appropriately cut off aid and support to Cuba for years. Why was that? Because they were supporting a Soviet base there for decades, right on their territory. And I think the rapprochement that we're doing with Cuba, we should cut off and make them pay a price for the fact that they're going to house Chinese capability on their territory, knowing full well that China is the #1 threat the United States is facing.
General, think about this. We had that uprising from 2 years ago where the people of Cuba, just joining just a semblance of human rights and hope, stood up, asked for help. Now, we weren't going to get involved militarily. We offered not even words of support. In comes the oppressive government, aided by the billions from China, who have great ability to listen in and surveil their population. I'm sure they gave that technology to the Cuban government for their population. So that our inaction comes back to bite us again. If I can, let's pivot, if we can, to Russia-Ukraine war. The counterinsurgency, some say, is going slower than the Ukrainians thought. The Russians are much more dug in and a little bit more prepared than we thought. What does your assessment say?
Yeah, what's happened is the Russians have had all those months to prepare and thicken their defenses while the Ukrainians were waiting, to receive all of that Western equipment after they certainly had to be trained on it as well. What the Ukrainians are not going to do is be foolish like the Russians. We saw the Russians attack wave after wave into Bakhmut, and literally thousands of their troops got slaughtered. What the Ukrainians are trying to do, so our audience understands, is feel their way through these defenses to pick out the best opportunity to penetrate. And that takes some time because they don't want to expend their forces. There's minefields out there, there's huge obstacles that are out there. So they're doing a lot of things at night. They're using foot infantry to infiltrate at night so they can surprise the Russian defenses and pick out the best place to penetrate. Most of the Western brigades that contain the equipment that we provided, as well as the training to the Ukrainian soldiers, those Western equipped brigades that the Ukrainians have Most of them have not been committed to this fight yet. They will represent the main effort. So when we see that, we'll know then that the Ukrainians have found what they believe is the best opportunity to penetrate. And if they are able to do that, I do think they can exploit and take significant territory. In the meantime, you see what's happening. They're using their long-range weapon system to destroy as much of Russia's logistical infrastructure as they can, which they had done in previous offensive back in June. So they just took out a bridge that aids Crimea significantly, and that'll be out for weeks, Brian, as a result of that. They're going to continue to do that with HIMARS, with the Storm Shadow cruise missile systems, and other long-range systems.
All right, we'll keep an eye on that, and I think that Ukraine knows it's June. It's not December. There's still time to have an effective counter-surgery season. Thanks so much, General. Great to see you.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.